Hey, thank all of you for being here. My name is Bill Cleveland, and I see my good friend Todd Freeman out there. How you doing, Todd? We'd like to welcome all of you here to this wonderful program. And Carissa, you're leaving me. I want to introduce you to introduce everybody else, because nobody came to hear me. We've got some very distinguished folks here tonight. We just want to welcome you and thank Sanford University for allowing us to use their wonderful new School of Business. Yes, we really appreciate them allowing us to do that. And I'm going to turn it right over to you to introduce the VIPs here.
Thank y'all. I am Carissa Anthony. I'm the coordinator for the Safe and Healthy Homewood Coalition. So I work in the Homewood school system doing drug prevention, but other types of prevention too. And so I do have the privilege of introducing everyone. You'll notice on your agenda that this was all put together by a collaborative effort of a lot of drug prevention coalitions that are in this region, in this area. So All in Mountain Brook, Help the Hills, the Addiction Prevention Coalition, Safe and Healthy Homewood Coalition, Jefferson County Health Department has helped, I think, and the Addiction and Recovery Alliance. That's right, that's another one that all helped. And then of course the School of Business here with Sanford. So it took a lot of hands to make this come together, and we appreciate y'all being here tonight. So I'm going to introduce Lauren Sisler. Lauren is our keynote speaker tonight, and she has such an inspiring story to share. She is a national award-winning sports broadcaster. She works with ESPN, SEC Nation, and AL.com. So she's all over the place. It was very fun on Saturday night to be at Elevate the Stage, the gymnastics competition between Alabama and Auburn, and I looked down and there's Lauren and she's doing the floss. So that is another talent. That is another talent she has, and hopefully she'll show us that tonight.
I can't nail the transition.
But without further ado, Lauren Sisler.
Not used to these computers, these PCs. I'm used to the MacBook here. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I'm glad that each and every one of you chose to be here tonight, because we all know substance abuse is not something that's easy to talk about. But here's the deal, we need to talk about it, and this is a call to action for everyone. If I knew then what I knew now about what addiction is, maybe the course of my life and my loved ones could have taken a different path. And so I'm going to take you back to the very beginning, to the quiet suburban neighborhood that I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. Yes, I am a Southern girl. I am from Virginia. I consider myself a Southern girl. We were a very happy family. It was my mom and my dad, Butch and Leslie Sisler, and my older brother, Alan. But like most families, we were very busy, always on the go, whether it was football practice, basketball practice, baseball practice for my brother. You parents know all about that cycle, on and on and on. But for me, it was gymnastics practice, 4 days a week. During the summers, we spent a lot of time going to and from the neighborhood swimming pool, riding our bikes around, until, of course, we heard the whistle from good old Dad, that loud, piercing whistle from a block away, letting us know it was time to come in for dinner. My mom always had a hot meal on the dinner table. Of course, the picky one here, it was usually SpaghettiOs, macaroni and cheese, all the stuff that, of course, kids like. But I do remember those family dinners because it was an opportunity for us to all be together, to share things that were going on in our lives, talk about our report cards, our grades, our athletics, whatever it may be. But some of my fondest memories were the countless hours I spent in the backyard, jumping on my trampoline, practicing my floor routine. And for me, that was always awesome because I got to spend that time out in the backyard while my parents were mowing the lawn or washing the car, or whatever it may be. And there was no doubt that my parents always had a watchful eye on me and my brother, always taking great pride in what we were doing, being our biggest cheerleaders, picking us up when we were down, and lifting us up in our successes, and ultimately loving me and my brother Alan unconditionally. I'll never forget my very first level 10 national meet in gymnastics. We competed in Florida, and I'm on my third rotation, and it was the balance beam. And I'm going through each skill and each motion, and I'm doing a great routine, and next thing you know, I start to lose my balance. I start to wobble, and I fall. Thankfully, I was okay, but that disappointment just really welled up inside of me. And my mom could see the disappointment in my eyes, knowing that I felt that I had let them down and that I'd let my coaches down. But in that moment, it was silence in that arena. My mom jumped out of her seat and she said, "Lauren, it's okay. We're still going to Disney World." And I remember that. And that was a moment in my life that really lifted my spirits. And I knew in that moment everything was going to be okay. And we went to Disney World, and we had a blast. The thing is, in gymnastics, that became my sport. I grew stronger. I also grew taller. For those of you who don't know, most gymnasts are about 4'9", maybe 5'2". Without heels on, I am 5'9". So I kind of missed the mark just a little bit in this sport. Maybe I should have pursued the WNBA. That might have been a little better for me. However, I grew very competitive in the sport, started winning competitions, and really felt that this was an opportunity for me to take my career to the next level. College gymnastics. And that was something I dreamed of. Maybe this was an opportunity to repay my parents, to give back all the time that I spent in the gym every single day. I was training 20 to 25 hours a week, traveling to and from practice, hour-plus commute every single day. And now, maybe I could give back on this investment and pursue my dreams to be a collegiate gymnast. And so the offers started rolling in, and a few offers I got were from NC State, UNC, West Virginia University, and Rutgers University, the State University of New Jersey. Of course, Rutgers was never really on my radar until, of course, I went for an official visit. And really, that's all it took for me to fall in love with the campus, fall in love with my teammates, my coaches, and really this new dream of going on to be a collegiate gymnast. And so I put the pen to paper, I signed my letter of intent, and I'm off to college. I still remember that day when I moved into my dorm room and we were unpacking the boxes, and the last box was unpacked, and I'm sitting there on my bed and I see my parents standing in the doorway, and it's time to say goodbye. But of course, it's never goodbye, it's always see you later. And I could see in their eyes that they were proud because their little girl had finally made it. So we'll fast forward to the second semester when I was at Rutgers. I was studying for some exams and getting ready for the next day. And as I always do, I picked up the phone and called my parents. Not a day went by that I didn't pick up the phone and call my parents. My mom answered the phone, and I talked to her for a few minutes about practice. I had a good day. And then she handed the phone off to my father and said, how are things going? And my father and I talked a little bit about schoolwork and just about life in general. And it was a very short conversation. And then, before we hung up, I said, "Mom, Dad, I love you." And both of my parents said, "We love you too, Whoa." Whoa being my nickname. So I set my alarm clock, and I go to bed, and a few hours pass, and my phone rings. I look at the clock, and it's the middle of the night. And I'm thinking, oh, this can't be good. Who's calling me in the middle of the night? So I answer the phone, and I'm frantic. I'm out of breath, and I'm like, "Hello?" And my dad is on the other end, and he says, "Lauren, I need to talk to your brother." And I said, "What's wrong, Dad?" He said, "Lauren, I just need to talk to your brother." And I could tell in his voice there was so much distress and hurt. I said, "Dad, please tell me what's wrong." He said, "Lauren, I'm sorry, but your mom died." And I said, "What? Dad, what do you mean Mom died? I don't understand." "What do you mean Mom died? What happened?" And he said, Lauren, I'm sorry, I can't explain it now. Get on the next plane you can. I'll be at the airport to pick you up. So as you can imagine, all these emotions are flowing through me. I jump out of the bed. I start throwing stuff in my bag. I run downstairs, bang on my friend's door. I said, Craig, help me. He said, Lauren, what's wrong? And I said, I need a ride to the airport. My mom died. So we go to the airport, and it was as if it was a race against time. All I wanted to do, I wanted to get home. I wanted to see my dad. I wanted to know everything was going to be okay. My plane touches down in Roanoke, and I jump off that plane, and I start sprinting to the terminal. All I wanted to do in that very moment was run and jump in my dad's arms. And as I run outside, I'm standing on the curb. It's a very small airport. I'm looking everywhere for my father. He's nowhere to be found, and I just stand there for a few minutes waiting. And my dad never shows up. And instead, it's my Uncle Mike and my cousin Justin. And in that moment, I'm just thinking in my mind, everything's going to be okay. My dad's just taking care of stuff at the hospital. Everything will be okay. We get in the car, we start driving, and as we exit the airport, I finally worked up the courage to ask my Uncle Mike. I said, Uncle Mike, I said, what happened to my dad? And I can still feel the gravel underneath the car as he pulled that car over, slammed on the brakes, and put it in park, and turned around and looked at me and said, Lauren, I'm sorry, but your dad's passed away too. And those words just cut me. What do you mean? How in the world does this happen within hours of each other? What happened? Please, someone tell me what happened to my parents. I still ask myself that very same question, even to this day, 16 years later. What happened to my parents? Unfortunately, it would be months before we would learn what ultimately stole both of my parents' lives. Prescription drug overdoses. Both of my parents, within hours of each other. My mom just 45 and my dad 52. Do these look like people that were addicted to drugs? My mom was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, and she had multiple surgeries over the course of time. My father had chronic back pain and also suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, from his service in the military. Both of my parents had been seeking pain management from a doctor in Roanoke and been prescribed multiple drugs, one of those being Oxycontin, the other being fentanyl. Fentanyl is a morphine, a type of morphine that is in a time-release pain patch, typically given to terminally ill patients in the end of their days. Were my parents terminally ill? Absolutely not. Why in the world were my parents taking this medication? The truth of it is, my parents were suffering in silence from their addiction. They were suffering in silence because of the stigma that surrounds addiction. They didn't want people to know that they were suffering. And so they kept it to themselves. And I think the hardest part is knowing my parents got out of bed every single morning with a smile on their face. And how could this happen to them? And how, as a family, could none of us know? Like, how could none of us know? And I think that's the one question I ask myself. How did I not know this was going on at 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old? March 24th, 2003 was the day that I lost both of my parents. And I think one of the hardest things is I'm getting set to get married here in a year. And I think to myself, I want nothing more than my father to be there to walk me down the aisle. I think that, and planning the wedding and knowing that he won't be there, my parents won't be there to share that first dance. My kids will never know their grandparents. And I will never ever pick up that phone again and hear my parents on the other end telling me they love me. And I think to me that is the biggest struggle that I have every single day. I live with this every single day. A harsh memory for me is when, just shortly after their passing, my brother and I were standing in our home, my parents' home, as a moving truck came up the driveway, 4 men got out of that truck, came into that house, and within 2 hours, every single thing in that house was cleared out. Every single piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, every piece of clothing, and all of that was auctioned off to the estate to complete strangers. And so all that I'm left with are a few pictures and a few things that my brother actually had to go back to the auction to purchase back. And I think that's the sad truth of it, is all of this stuff was because of addiction. But this is my new life and this is my new reality, and so now I've got to learn to live life without my parents. And I'm 18 years old, so what am I going to do here? I'm 18 years old, I didn't even know how to write a check. But I really was given no option, and by the grace of God, and thankfully my Aunt Linda and my Uncle Mike really took me under their wing and helped me sort of redefine my pathway to success. They said, Lauren, you have no choice, you've got to go back to school. So 2 weeks after burying both of my parents, I went back to school, I went back to Rutgers, because I knew it was the right thing to do. It was a commitment I had to my university, to myself, to my teammates, and I knew that's what my parents would want. But sadly, my dreams and everything that was still in front of me was becoming tarnished by all the emotions that were running through me every single day. Somebody that was an AB honor roll student, I was making C's and D's. I've never seen an F on a paper in my life. That became normal for me. I was in and out of the training room. I couldn't stay healthy. I couldn't compete. I couldn't give back to my team and give them what they wanted and really live up to the expectation of being on scholarship. And I think that was the hardest part for me, is knowing that I was drowning in my own shame, in my own denial, because I didn't want to accept what was happening. I didn't want to accept the fact that my parents were never coming back and the reasons that my parents were never coming back. But ultimately what I realized after about a year and a half, as I started to kind of climb back out of that hole, is that I had to control what is next. I can't control what happened, but I can ultimately take control of my own destiny and do something about it. And so really what I did was started to reevaluate myself, reevaluate what it is I can be good at, my passions. I wanted to be a sports doctor growing up. Unfortunately, that kind of went out the window. I think also becoming more mature and understanding what that took in terms of studying. And I'm a little bit squeamish these days. Those injuries on the basketball court, those rolled ankles, woo! Not something I enjoy looking at. So in May of 2006, I graduated with a communications degree and started putting those wheels in motion, because for me, sports broadcasting was something that maybe I could do, and I really found that it's become more of not just a passion for me, but a purpose. And so I started jumping around from TV station to TV station and landed here in 2011 in Birmingham, Alabama. And let me tell you, I had never thought of Birmingham, Alabama, but I love it here. And I'm here to stay, whether you like it or not. You know, the one question I get a lot is, are you an Alabama fan or are you an Auburn fan? And I always tell people, I am a fan of whichever team I'm covering on any given day, because, oh, by the way, standing in a locker room after a national championship with grown men crying with a mic in their face is not fun. Not something I enjoy very much of. Also, I wear scarlet on my sleeve, so I have to remind people here, when I'm wearing red, it is not crimson, my friends. It is scarlet. But I have to tell you one thing about my job that is so exciting. It isn't about the national championships, you know, the confetti falling from the field. It's funny, I was walking through the newsroom the other day at AL.com and kicked off this confetti from the national championship, but I hate to blow it to you Alabama fans, it was orange and purple. Wrong season, right? But that confetti represents so much more than a national championship. It represents stories. And I think that's what I'm so fortunate for, is to be able to share those stories and to be able to share the stories of others, because I believe that they have the ability to impact the lives of others. And I think my vision of that was once blurred because I wasn't even okay with my own story. I wasn't even honest with my own story. For me, it took 7 years to learn what ultimately took my parents' lives. 7 years. I didn't even pick up the toxicology reports for 10 years because I was in denial. I was in straight denial. I did not want to believe that either of my parents could be addicts. I could not use the word addiction or overdose in the same sentence with both my parents. No way these two people that were loved by so many were addicts. Ultimately, I didn't want to be judged because I felt that my legacy, my parents' legacy, was bound in my hands. And I felt that if I let people know ultimately what happened to them, we would be judged. But what happened is, over the years, my auntie Linda, started to break down those walls and help me to see what it really was. But ultimately, she said, Lauren, look, you can't dictate the opinions of others. You can't erase time. You can't change how your parents died. But ultimately, this is their story. This is reality. And what I found is as I shared their story with more and more people, with courage and with strength and with honesty, they started to embrace me and my brother even more. There was no shame. There was no, wow, well, your parents are drug addicts. They said, you know what? Your parents came to work every single day. They got out of bed every single day and took care of you and your brother, and they have raised two fine young men and women. And I think that's what means so much to me. Finally, I have been set free. No more shame, no more guilt, no more denial. I have been set free, and I can now breathe. Because the truth of it is, nobody is exempt from life's difficult circumstances. Nobody. Not a single person. It doesn't matter where you're from, where you grew up, the job you have, the car you drive. Everyone is impacted by this disease of addiction. And I think what you have to realize is you have the freedom of choice. You have the freedom to choose how you're going to respond to adversity, no matter what it is. Because everybody's got a story. Everybody's going through something. Do we take a similar path? Is it our excuse, our hall pass? Well, you know what, they went down that road. I guess this is the road I'm destined to go down. Do we sweep it under the rug and pretend like it never happened? Or do we step up to the plate and do something about it as a community? Educate ourselves, empower ourselves to go out there and do something about it. There's a prevention element, and there's also hope and recovery. And I think those are the things we need to realize. We can get in front of this thing, and I think it is so important that you realize addiction is a family disease. It wreaks havoc on anything and everything that stands in its way. And ultimately, it will stare you in the face, and it will suck the joy out of you. In my opinion, addiction is the thief of all joy. And I think what we have to realize is that our children and our communities are faced with this thing. Addiction is waiting to prey on your children and take them to a place that nobody should ever be, because it is a scary place. And so I just want to say thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to share my story. And I really hope that you guys brought some notebooks, some pens and papers. We got it up here because we got some awesome speakers tonight that are going to give us some awesome information and equip us with the ability to go out and share with the rest of the world. So thank you again. I appreciate it. So I'm going to introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Susan Wally. She's a professor of pediatrics at the University of Alabama at Birmingham and a pediatric hospitalist at Children's of Alabama and has been there since 2000. She has a passion to protect youth from tobacco and nicotine and tobacco smoke exposure through research, clinical, and advocacy efforts. She served as the chair of the American of Pediatrics section of Tobacco Control and is the principal investigator for the Alabama Department of Health Youth Tobacco Prevention Program Birmingham grant. She has spoken numerous times locally, regionally, and nationally. So I think we need to just give it up one more time.
All right, I'm just going to say that is not fair for me to have to go after Lauren. And that was just really amazing. You know, there's something in public health that we say, you know, data tells, but stories sell. And, you know, Lauren is an absolute example of how that story is so powerful. We're going to be talking a lot about something that really, you know, relates, because Lauren's telling the story of prescription drugs, and, kids don't start with things like heroin or fentanyl. And this is one of the, what we think of as a gateway to those things. So I'm just gonna use the mic, Lauren, no worries.
Okay, if you just tangle it up, I'm coming.
All right, can everybody hear me okay with this? Yeah. All right, fantastic. So we're gonna be talking about e-cigarettes and vape and Juul, and just to kind of, for those of you who may be hearing some of these words, has anybody not heard of Juul? Okay.
I think this mic is a little bit too loud, I'm feeling like. Is that better?
Not a seamless
There
treatment.
we go. How's that? Okay. All right. So this is a picture that a colleague of mine actually prepared in 2015. And while I think it is really a great picture of kind of the vaping culture, it really is so far from what we are seeing now in our youth. Sorry, I can't get this quite right. It's very sensitive. But, so what we're going to be talking about is, what does electronic cigarettes mean? What is the data on them now? Because they're really an emerging product, but we have enough to know that they are not safe, and they are definitely not safe for our kids. So, electronic cigarettes and vape, we're talking really about the same thing, and we're going to go over that in a little bit more detail. But what you see here is a picture that ranges from the second to the top is a conventional cigarette. And you can see this big range of assortment from an e-cigar to what is sort of more thought of as a tank system at the bottom. But this is what our youth are really looking at and using. And so I have a Juul, and Abby has been very kind to bring a lot of samples as well. And Juul, and we'll talk about a little bit more, is right now got the majority of the market share. What you see on the top right is Juul products, but they have a Juul skin. You can buy this online, you can personalize your Juul. There's something called Soren, SMPO. Who's seen some of these products? I know some of our educators have definitely, but I think and one of the things that really I feel very passionate about is that the people that I talk to, now you're the experts. I want to train the trainers. So when you go out and you talk to your friends or you talk to fellow colleagues, it's really important to get this message across, because parents find some of these products in their kids' backpacks or pockets or sock drawer, and they don't know what they are. And so you guys are now the experts. And so Juul in particular, there's some, you can see some of the advertising that they have used, which is very similar to what Big Tobacco has used in terms of thinking about, this is a sexy models, mainly young, white, and using these products with clearly a health message, that this is healthy. But Juul was 72% of the market share as of last quarter. We think, unfortunately, we're going to be seeing more and more of this product. And Juul is what we call a pod system. So anybody seen these pods or these tops? I think before I really knew about Juul, you see some of these tops everywhere, and you think, what are those? It's a kind of disaster in terms of plastic and recycling. But basically, the pod goes into the product, and then you can charge it with just a regular USB. And I'm going to pass some of these around so you can really just take a look and see also some of the marketing. We call these the iPhones of smartphones. They just have a very innovative design. As you can tell, they look like a USB. They really are very deceptive. And I don't think that is any type of accident. So Juul was actually started by 2 Stanford graduate students. And, it's hard to know what their ultimate goal was. They say that it's because they were smokers and they were trying to give smokers an alternative to quit. We'll talk about how that, unfortunately, is not what we're seeing. But whatever they started with, Unfortunately, they have sold out. Altria, which is also known as Philip Morris, purchased a third stake. That doesn't even count what they paid the Juul staff for $12.8 billion with a B. So you know that we're talking about big money, and anytime big money is involved, unfortunately, what we're seeing is our kids are the ones that are really being targeted. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. Even though there's so many different products, I think it's important for all of us to know that really the parts of the electronic cigarette are very similar. You have, can you see this here? No. But, so there's a mouthpiece, and then basically there's a battery. And have any of you guys heard some of the media stuff about batteries exploding? There was somebody who died, probably in the last few months. So unfortunately, little to no regulation. And so the battery, what it does is it takes the liquid and it heats it up, and basically it forms what's really an aerosol, but what a lot of people call a vapor. And the reason that's important to distinguish is that, the vapor, you kind of think of water vapor, Harmless, and I know that there's a lot of marking to that. The aerosol is really these ultrafine particles, and those ultrafine particles get very deep into the lungs. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, is that those ultrafine particles can cause lung irritation, lung damage, and also lead to some of the same, unfortunately, health effects that we're seeing with cigarettes. I did forget to mention, but we're going to go through, that part of the concern with these pod systems is that they, number one, they all contain nicotine. So I know frequently at events like this where there's parents, they say, oh, well, my son told me there was no nicotine in this. And as those Juul boxes go around, you can see that it is very hard to tell that there's nicotine in these products because there's tiny, like 6-point font that says 5% strength. And then when you really get down into it, you see that it says, this is nicotine. There is no pod system that I'm aware of that is from the manufacturer that is zero nicotine. So basically what's happening is our youth are being exposed to very high levels of nicotine when they're using these products. So just to put that in a little bit of perspective, the Juul has pods that are 59 milligrams per milliliter. 59 milligrams. And when you take a cigarette and you smoke it, you get about 1 to 2 milligrams total from that cigarette. So you're looking at a huge, a very, very high concentration, between 1 Juul pod and, even an entire pack, a 20 pack, 20 cigarettes in a pack. So that makes us very concerned that youth are using these products, they don't even know that there's nicotine, and then they can become addicted very quickly because of the amount of nicotine in it. So there are really just 4 main take-home points that I want to get across because we've got these amazing speakers after me. That electronic cigarettes are the most common tobacco product used by youth. That's been the case since 2014. That they contain nicotine, just like I said, and youth are more likely to be addicted. And we're going to hear more about that, about the adolescent brain and what those effects are. We know that youth who use e-cigarettes are more likely to go on to traditional cigarettes. There's lots of good data at this point about that. And then really scary that there's new data that is emerging that looks at cross-sectional populations of adolescents and finds that those adolescents are more likely to be using marijuana, more likely to go on to other drugs of abuse. I don't think any of us are probably surprised about that, right? So you start one product, and of course, using tobacco in Alabama is illegal if you're less than 19 years of age. So, you have somebody who's using a product that's illegal, and then it makes sense that they go on to other products. And we know, again, we have enough information right now to know that e-cigarette use is not safe. It has toxicants and carcinogens, cancer-causing agents, and they have negative impacts on public health. So we'll dive into those a little bit more. So this is from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. This came out just this past November, got a lot of media attention. And the reason is that e-cigarette use, which includes Juul, includes vape, went up dramatically by 78%. And when you look at some other national surveys, there's something called Monitoring the Future, that increase is the highest increase of any substance that has been recorded in a 1-year period. So we're talking this, historic, horrible increase, and how is that happening to our kids right under our noses? So, thinking about this community and how engaged you guys are in terms of, what's happening at the school level, what's happening at the community level is really important. So I'm so excited to see everybody here. For years and decades, I started getting into this work in about the mid-2000s. Tobacco use was dropping among kids, and we were all really excited about it. But unfortunately, with the huge rise in electronic cigarette use, we're seeing total tobacco use rise as well. And so this is kind of a little bit more of a breakdown. I know this is a little bit busy, but on the x-axis on that bottom, you see the different types of tobacco products, and then on the y-axis, there's a percentage. And so what you're basically seeing in the red bar on the left is the fact that, we were seeing tobacco use go down. The black bar is 2018, that shot up, and really it is pretty much all because of electronic cigarette use going up so much. And so, people ask, where do kids get them? This is a picture from a vape shop. This is in Hoover, but I could certainly show you multiple in many parts of Birmingham. And vape shops have gotten a lot of notoriety. I think, reasonably so. But really, most of our kids are getting electronic cigarettes, Juul, vape, I'm using all those terms interchangeably, from the convenience store, the gas station down the road. And this is a picture of a convenience store, gas station, very close to a high school. And I know it is a little bit hard to see, but there is Juul products, and Juul products that are also like knockoff Juul products that basically our youth have access to, and that's something that I think is important to know, that these products have flavors, and these flavors are very enticing to kids. And so, not only can, oftentimes there's easy access at convenience stores and gas stations. Online is definitely a place where we are concerned about from a public health standpoint. So this is the Juul website, and there have been some changes to it with age verification, but basically it says you must be at least 21 years of age to purchase products on Juul. And it says, the top blue says, I am 21 and agree to be age verified. And basically you click on that button and it asks you for your birthday, and then you can get in to buy the Juul products that you want. It's not that foolproof of a method. And the price point for these is higher than what you might have with a pack of cigarettes. At the start, you can buy a Juul, just the actual device, for, it's about $40 for a Juul plus a multi-pack. And then after that, generally you buy them in packs of 4. For, online, it can be $16. So one Juul pod, people compare to one pack of cigarettes. And in Alabama, unfortunately, we have one of the lowest tobacco taxes in the country. And so a pack of cigarettes, I think the average is about $4.50. And so when you say a pod of the Juul is about $4, then you're kind of thinking about comparable costs there. So next point is that e-cigarettes, we already know, most often contain nicotine, and the pod systems all contain nicotine, and youth are more likely to be addicted. And so I think a big learning point is that these are tobacco products. So this is just a picture of the tobacco plant on the upper left, and then that's cured and dried, and then basically ground up. That's what's in cigarettes, but that's also what's in those e-cigarette liquids, including the pod. So any e-cigarette that contains nicotine or liquid is a tobacco product by definition, and that's important when we think about regulation and how we can protect our kids. So in terms of nicotine addiction, or any addiction, and we've got some big experts coming up, that we know the adolescent brain is very susceptible to addiction. And not only are they susceptible to addiction, But we know that from animal models that that when you're exposed to nicotine in the adolescent period, you can have permanent cell damage and changes that can be permanent. So of course that makes us very concerned when we're seeing this huge uptake. 1 in 5 of our high school students using electronic cigarettes. And then we've already kind of touched on the gateway theory, that you're more likely to be using other products and that because your brain chemistry has been changed. So going on to e-cigarettes, being that when you use e-cigarettes, that you're more likely to go on to traditional cigarettes and other substances of abuse. Again, this is something that 5 years ago I wasn't able to say. But we have a lot of data now from multiple different studies that youth who are using e-cigarettes, even if they're, quote, the good kids, the kids who have very low risk factors, they're 4 times more likely to go on to start cigarette smoking. And, cigarettes we know are really the most lethal product known to man. They kill 1 out of every 2 long-term smokers. So absolutely, while e-cigarettes we know are not safe, we don't want them to be going on to cigarette smoking. And then lastly, e-cigarette use, again, not safe. We know that they have negative impacts on public health. And so when we look at e-cigarettes and what is advertised, and I already mentioned that we're in a period of very little regulation. It's not accurate to say there's no regulation because the FDA in 2016 basically passed a deeming rule, which basically means that not in addition to traditional cigarettes, which they got that ability in 2009, they can actually impose some regulations on e-cigarettes as well as cigars. Unfortunately, a lot of those regulations have been postponed till 2022. The FDA right now is looking at fast-tracking, making those things happen a little bit earlier in terms of having what is actually on the products really is what is in the products. But right now what we know is that the ingredients that are advertised in e-cigarette solutions generally are humectants. So anybody ever been to a concert with all that stage smoke? That's a lot of those humectants. Humectants are something that are very common. They are in a lot of cosmetics. We know they are safe for ingestion. But in terms of inhalation, those ultrafine particles that we talked about, we really have no long-term data to know. And in fact, we have some data that makes us very concerned about the safety. We know that e-cigarettes, when you look at the packaging, they'll also say that they have flavoring, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, like I mentioned, nicotine. So this is a great kiosk. I love showing this because it really shows a lot of the range of things that we are very concerned about with e-cigarettes. So on the top, you kind of see, that there's lots of dessert, candy type flavors, and then, from the top, you see that 0 milligram of nicotine, and that is really a completely inadequate way to characterize. What does 0 milligrams of nicotine mean? It generally means 0 milligrams per milliliter. Because if you go down and you see there's 0 milligrams, 8 milligrams, 12, and 24 milligrams. Now that's the old e-cigarettes. So I already mentioned that Juul is 59 milligrams per milliliter. So, the traditional what e-cigarettes came out as, we're seeing them keep upping the ante. With what you see here, Juul is twice as concentrated in terms of the nicotine. So thinking about what is advertised and what's actually in them, we're seeing huge differences. And so, of course, we have found the humectants, which is propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, that stage smoke that I talked about, the flavoring, nicotine. But unfortunately, what we're also seeing is a lot of the same things that we see in tobacco products or in cigarettes. We have some toxicants, carcinogens, tobacco-specific nitrosamines, which we know cause cancer, those ultrafine particles that get really deep in the lungs, like we talked about. We know that the coils, those metal coils that heat up the liquid degrade, and so we've seen metallic nanoparticles, you know, really just a bunch of stuff that we know is not safe. And so while we don't have enough information at this point to say that electronic cigarettes cause cancer, for example, we know that the intermediate step is there, that it has the same products, the same carcinogens that cause cancer in cigarettes, but we just don't have the 20, 50 years of data to say that this leads to this yet. Now, the problem is that when 1 in 5 of our high school students are using these products, and using them not even experimentally, but using them 20 out of 30 days a month, what we're concerned about is, you know, 20 years from now, when they're in their late 30s and their 40s, we don't want to see this huge rise of cancers and other things. We want to try to, you know, stop it now. And unfortunately, you know, the cat's out of the bag, but you guys, this community, has ways that we know are effective that can fight this. So we talked about humectants a little bit, just, you know, to arm you with other things to know about that propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. Again, they're generally recognized as safe for ingestion, but when we talk about inhaling, we know that the propylene glycol can lead to respiratory irritation, and then the vegetable glycerin can lead to acrolein production, which is one of the worst carcinogens, one of the worst cancer-causing agents that are out there. And then flavorings, we really don't have any information about flavorings overall. Part of the problem is there's about 15,000 flavors, but we do know some specific ones. Cinnamon, we know can impair immune function. We've known that for a while. Buttery flavors can cause, like what we've seen in popcorn factory workers, is popcorn lung, bronchiolitis obliterans. And one of our largest concerns is flavors are known to appeal to you. So I speak at schools, to high school and middle school, and one of the things that we'll do is we'll get a bag of Sour Patch Kids, and we'll put a pack of cigarettes in there. And we'll basically give this bag of Sour Patch Kids to the kids to say, what's inside this? And they're like, ooh, cigarettes, yuck. You know, because you know, from a public health perspective, people like Dr. Wilson have done a great job teaching our kids these are not safe. But what's happening is that e-cigarette companies are getting really smart, and they're hiding kind of the health concerns in these fun packages with Sour Patch Kids, with, you know, donut flavors. There's 15,000 of these flavors. So it's going to take a really long time for the scientific community to catch up with what is in all of these flavors, but we already know that they're very appealing to kids. And then, you know, just to kind of, you know, make sure to let you guys know from the standpoint of what's harmful for adults and kids, you know, cigarettes, you know, have 7,000 chemicals. We know 70 of them cause cancer, and what we are now learning is that e-cigarettes are having some of the same effects. So for those of you who are kind of nerdy like me, there's a National Academy of Science report. It's hundreds of pages, but there is a summary statement that's maybe 10 pages. And it basically has boiled down a lot of the literature. At this point, it's about a year old, and it's already, you know, there's so much stuff out there that's emerging that's scary about e-cigarettes and what the health effects are. But really quickly, we know that in terms of cardiac effects, so most people think about lung cancer with smoking, but the majority of the deaths are from stroke, heart attack, cardiovascular disease. And what we know about e-cigarettes is that the aerosols can induce endothelial cell dysfunction, which is the same pathophysiology that you're getting a lot of cardiovascular disease. So again, e-cigarettes have the same stuff as cigarettes. We can't say yet that they cause heart attack, but that pathway is there. Same thing with cancer. We know that they can cause DNA damage, but we're not at the point where we can say definitively lung cancer. But we don't want to wait the 20 years and have all our kids addicted before we know that for sure. And then there is definitely enough information for us to say that kids who are using e-cigarettes are more likely to cough and wheeze. You know, we want to definitely make sure that we're protecting our children, particularly with respiratory illnesses such as asthma. So lastly, public health harms. This is a blue advertisement that, this was really big initially, that you can smoke anywhere, even in the places you can't smoke, you can vape. And so there's a lot of potential concerns in the public health field with e-cigarettes and with as many of our youth that are using. And so lastly, I'm just going to finish with, talking about e-cigarettes as a smoking cessation device. And we know that they are not effective. And in fact, with all of these studies, this is a meta-analysis, smokers, when you combine them all together, because there's no perfect study, that smokers who are trying to quit using e-cigarettes are actually less likely to quit. What we're finding is that they become dual users. They're using both the e-cigarette and the cigarette, and unfortunately, we know that the combination of the two can even have worse health effects with some emerging data that's coming out. So definitely want to make sure that this audience knows if you have a friend or you know somebody who's wanting to quit, you should not that you would be necessarily recommending e-cigarettes, but you should encourage them. See your doctor, definitely have your doctor prescribe things that we know work. So that is it. I think I'm on time, and thank you guys so much. I think our next speaker is coming up now, Lauren.
Lauren introduces our next speaker, because we're at a point where parents, yes, you have to talk to your children about e-cigarettes. That's very important. Schools are doing everything they can. I feel like we're all a bit overwhelmed with this particular issue and this particular substance. By its very design, it's designed to be very discreet. It's designed to go without detection, which is a challenge, and almost just an unbelievable challenge for parents, educators, everyone that works with children. So I would like to encourage you to reach out to your legislator and tell them we need to have some strict rules on this, because the very design of the product is designed to go undetected. That's not okay. We're kind of swimming upstream on this one. And I've recently learned that it only takes 8 people to contact their legislator for their legislator to go, hey, folks in my district care about this. They want me to do something with this. So be one of the 8.
So our next speaker tonight, Dr. Stephen Taylor, a board-certified in general psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, addiction psychiatry, and addiction medicine. In his nearly 25 years of practice experience and as an educator and presenter, Dr. Taylor's life's work and greatest passion has been to help teenagers and adults avoid or overcome the devastating disease of addiction and co-occurring general psychiatric disorders. Dr. Taylor is currently in his 12th season as the medical director of the Player Assistance and Anti-Drug Program of the National Basketball Association, also known as the NBA, and the National Basketball Players Association. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen Taylor.
I have the disadvantage. It generally helps if you turn things on if you want them to work.
I think you're wrong.
Yeah. I have the disadvantage not only of going after Lauren Sisler's incredible, touching, and very powerful presentation, but then I have this academician par excellence that I have to then go after as well. And I want to just give kudos to both of them, because both their presentations were amazing. And I have personally been enriched tremendously just by hearing both of them. I want to say thank you, because I was not originally part of the lineup. I am quite literally a pinch hitter here tonight. And so I just want to thank Carissa Anthony for thinking of having me come in to pinch hit for all of you. And I want to thank you all for coming out. I see a lot of familiar faces, friendly faces, in part because I've been living in Alabama for 22 years now. For many of those years, I've been doing work in various ways with all three of the communities represented here. So I was so excited to see when this event was happening with all three of these communities that I love, and one of which I live in, Golden State. We're getting together to put on this event. So I'm really excited. I don't want to spend too much time because Lauren Sisler is sitting over there timing me and making, she's got the paper to let me know if I'm even getting close to going overtime. So I want to get my slides up and get started without too much ado. We got weird things happening up here, so bear with me. Okay. So here's my topic: understanding addiction, preventing it from destroying your child. You heard that I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and also an addiction psychiatrist. I only became a psychiatrist because I wanted to help people who have substance use disorders, or even more importantly to my heart, try to prevent young people who might be at risk from developing substance use disorders. So that's actually why I'm here. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of information about me and where I come from. This is actually on, but not working at the moment. I'm sorry?
Maybe the battery.
Yeah, maybe.
It was working earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to manually advance these. I'm good. I can walk around and manually advance them. So, even this isn't working. That's maybe the reason why the remote isn't working. Okay. All right. First of all, just anybody here know who this gentleman is? The gentleman in this picture? All right. Just shout out the name if you know who he is. Jay-Z. All right, Jay-Z. This gentleman actually happens to be from the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York that I'm from. Okay, so you heard that Lauren Sisler's from Virginia. She's a Southern girl. I am not Southern. Okay? You can probably hear that in the way I speak. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, a little neighborhood called Bedford-Stuyvesant. All right, and that's the same neighborhood that Jay-Z is from. But I'm a bit older than Jay-Z, so I came through Bed-Stuy much sooner than he did. But I will tell you, as you can see here, Jay-Z has been very, very successful, right, in his career. Does anybody know what career Jay-Z had before he became a rapper? Who can tell me? Say it. I heard somebody say it. Drug dealer, correct. And so that is the Jay-Z that, as he lived in Bed-Stuy, in Brooklyn, before he became a rap star and a businessman and a mogul and a multimillionaire and all that good stuff. And before he had the good fortune to marry the young lady that you saw in that previous picture. All right, this is what he looked like back when he was in Bed-Stuy, when he was a drug dealer. And you know, that's actually Marcy Projects. That's where he grew up, in Marcy Projects. That's like a maybe 15, 20-minute walk from where I grew up in Bed-Stuy. All right? And here's actually what he probably looked like back in the day, sitting out, chilling out in front of Marcy Projects. I have no idea how I found that picture, but I have that picture of Jay-Z hanging out in Marcy Projects where he grew up. All right? So, drug dealer. And when we think of drug dealers, this is what we imagine, right? This is what we think of. This is a drug dealer. This is what a drug dealer looks like, right? But in fact, what we've had to learn the hard way with this opioid epidemic that we have going on is that the drug dealers that many of us have to be much more concerned about than the ones who look like this are actually ones who look like this, right? This is the drug dealer that many of us have to be concerned about. These are the drug dealers that literally have been responsible for the opioid addiction and opioid overdose epidemic that we have going on in this country right now, all right? And here's the other thing about it. There's another group of people, a much larger group of doctors that don't look like that. They just look like this. These people all too often are unwitting, unintentional drug dealers. And that is to say that they are not trying to be drug dealers. They're not trying to do anything other than help you. They want to help you to not be in excessive pain. They want to make sure that you are not in agony after they've done some procedure on you or what have you, right? And yet what has happened is because of this problem of overprescribing opioids, unfortunately, we doctors have been contributors to this problem as well. Now, you would think all the years that we've had this opioid epidemic going on, and with all of the effort that there's been educating doctors and educating the general public, and the fact of the matter is that the numbers have gone down. The overprescribing of opioids has really decreased. But I'm here to tell you, and I don't really have to tell you because you probably have experienced it yourself, this problem is not over. And I have a personal experience that I can share with you to give you an example of what I mean by that. This is my leftover bottle of hydrocodone from when I went to a dentist 2 to 3 weeks, about 3 weeks ago now. My own personal dentist. Now mind you, my dentist knows me very well. My dentist knows what I do for a living. My dentist knows that I eat, sleep, and breathe trying to help people get off of drugs and trying to teach people about the opioid epidemic. My dentist and I talk about this all the time. My dentist is an awesome dentist. I will kill you before I'll let you take me away from my dentist. I love my dentist is amazing. Let's be clear about this. And he and I sat when he was doing this very painful root canal on me, right? And I've had root canals before, but this one just wasn't going well, folks. This one was taking several visits, taking several hours. It was painful. And it was the first time I've ever had a dental procedure where I actually said to him, you know, Doc, I'm going to probably need an opioid, which just goes against everything I believe in, but I'm going to need an opioid for the pain after this one. And I said to him, but I only need a little bit, because I'm only going to end up taking maybe a day's worth, maybe 2 at the max. I'm not going to need much. And he and I actually ended up in a negotiation because he wanted to give me a little bit more because he knew it was painful. And he knew he was taking a long time and having a hard time getting done what he needed to get done. And he wanted to give me more. And I kept telling him, I promise you, I'm not going to need much. I'm not going to need you to give me much, just a little bit, just enough for one day at the max. And so we ended up prescribing it to me. I ended up taking 1 hydrocodone later that night, and that was all I needed. So even I have almost a full bottle of hydrocodone left over after my dentist appointment. So it struck me that if I, the Attila the Hun on addiction treatment, guy who lives and breathes and teaches this stuff and takes care of patients and educates the entire NBA about the dangers of prescription painkillers if they get injuries or after they have surgery, if I can end up with extra hydrocodone after my dental visit, I can only imagine the risk for everybody else out there when you go to a doctor or a dentist. And so one of the things I really want to get across to you is that you folks are going to have to take the lead. So I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. If you think about drug-addicted people, right, people with addictions, very often for a long, long time, this was the sort of prototypical picture. This is what we assume they look like, all right? But I'm here to tell you, and unfortunately we've all learned this the hard way as a country, this disease does not discriminate, okay? Doesn't care what gender you are, what race, what socioeconomic level, what part of the country, what religion. This disease does not discriminate, okay? So this is the stereotypical picture that we had of people with addictions, but now they could just as easily look like this, okay? And we all understand that, all right? So we're all in this together. We all have to fight this battle together, all right? Now, I wanted to come back to this issue of what you do, because this is my 6 degrees of separation between your kid and opioid abuse. If it can happen to me that I've got a whole lot of extra hydrocodone, then you know you have to go in there too. When you take your youngster to a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment or what have you, you got to go in there with the plan to manage this prescription that your child is going to get, okay? And this 6 degrees of separation is a set of suggestions that I would tell you that every parent should learn about and try to implement. Number 1, ask the doctor if opioids are actually necessary for the pain relief that your youngster has. I actually asked the doctor for an opioid this one time, but I've had previous dental procedures, I've had actual oral surgery in which I did not actually need an opioid at all. So, ibuprofen was all I needed. It's not always necessary for every procedure or for every kind of pain problem that you have to be on an opioid. Ask the doctor to realistically estimate how long are you going to need that opioid. How long is the pain going to be so severe that you need opioid level pain relief? Because you want to only get the amount in a prescription that will cover that length of time and have as little extra as possible. You also want to ask the doctor to prescribe only enough to cover that time, and then you, the parent, take hold of the prescription. You don't give it to your youngster. I know you've got a good I had 2 great youngsters. All right? My kids were awesome. And they did really, really well, and neither one of them ever had a substance abuse problem. But still, if I had it to do over again, even knowing what I know now about how great they turned out and how neither one of them had a problem, there's no way in the world I would let them take their own prescription if I were doing it again and they were teenagers. It's just not the wise thing to do. Transition as soon as possible to some non-opioid kind of medication. Think about this. There are lots of ways lots of medications that can treat pain that aren't necessarily prescription opioids, that aren't necessarily potentially addictive. All right? And so the opioids, you only need those for the most severe pain. That's why I only needed 1 hydrocodone tablet that night after my horrific root canal. All right? And then after that, I was on Motrin and I was fine. All right? So think about transitioning as soon as possible. And then what do you do after that? You do the same thing I'm going to do as soon as we leave here. I'm driving this. I found at my pharmacy, my Walgreens pharmacy up there on Highway 150 has a little box where you can take your extra medicine and you can dispense it there, dispose of it there. All right? That's why I brought that, because it would be a great prop for you, but also I've been planning to take that thing and take it there, and this is my opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
Also dispose of it. Would you let them know that?
Yes. There's a package of Deterra, which is a package that in all of your gift bags that will you can use to dispose of. Thank you. Can I borrow this for a second? It looks like this that you can use to dispose of old medication, particularly potentially addictive medication. Thank you for that. So again. But that's the other reason that I brought this, is because I'm literally driving to that Walgreens after this, and I'm going to get rid of it that way. All right? So those are the 6 degrees of separation. If you do those things, that's one way to decrease the risk that your youngster will start using opioids. All right? Now, I know I have to be very careful about time. I would like to have a young lady. Specifically a young lady, and one who does not know anything about boxing, so please raise your hand. Okay, good, perfect, you're in the right spot, come on. All right, now, you and I are gonna box, all right? Now, you ready? Okay, good. Now, when you're boxing me, right, and you're seeing what I'm doing, you know nothing about boxing, right? Right. But then, if I'm boxing you, and then I do this, what are you gonna do? Go ahead. No, that's exactly what happens, right? So even, I had to prompt you a little bit, but you knew that if I'm boxing you and I put my hands down, that's an opportunity to get knocked out. That's right. Thank you very much. What you see here is a picture of a gentleman. He's actually another one of my homeboys, actually. He grew up in Brownsville, which is the very next neighborhood over from Bed-Stuy, the one delivering the punch, not receiving it. And he was the classic example of if you let your guard down, you can get knocked out. The reason I'm showing you this picture is because I think it illustrates something that's extremely important. And that is with this disease of addiction, with the risk factors that can affect our young people to develop addiction, it's the same principle. If you let your guard down, you can get knocked out. We have to remain vigilant, okay? So that was the whole point of mine showing you that. Now, so I have this parents' prevention rule that I'd like to share with you, all right? Number 1, jump on it early. If you see something that's a little suspicious, that's a little off with your youngster, something that's in their bag that shouldn't be there, jump on it early. Don't just think, well, it's probably nothing, I'm not going to get too worried about it. Jump on it early. Be aggressive. Aggressively pursue it. Okay, now I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I've been taking care of kids for many, many years. And I understand the importance of a teenager having privacy. But you know what? When it comes to you trying to make sure that your youngster is not developing a problem with a substance, forget about privacy. That's just not the priority. You need to have the attitude that you'll do whatever it takes to keep your youngster safe. All right? And never let your guard down, like I said before. All right? So just remember those 3 principles. Jump on it early. Be aggressive. Never let your guard down. So here's the drug use spectrum. People talk about how the kids get started with drugs, right? The drug use spectrum, first you have experimentation, right? And kids try a little bit of stuff, you know, it's actually a normal part of adolescent development to try and experiment with new things, right? Then there's periodic use. Some youngsters, a smaller number, as you can see, will go on to periodically using the substance. And then there's an even smaller number that will develop regular use of substances, of one sort or another, whether it's alcohol or whatever, marijuana, whatever the substance. And an even smaller number will go on to frequent or constant use, right? And then the smallest number will go on to addictive or compulsive use, all right? And so a lot of people might think, well, if my kid's not in the regular use category or in the frequent or constant use category or maybe the addictive use category, then I don't need to worry so much. It's pretty normal for them to experiment, right? Well, I want to challenge that notion. I want you to think about the fact that anywhere up and down this drug use spectrum, I hope this is going to come up, maybe it won't. Yeah, that's what can happen. Anywhere up and down that spectrum, death can take place, even in the experimentation stage. So when you notice that your youngster is experimenting with substances, get concerned. Again, jump on it early, be aggressive, never let your guard down. Because even at the experimentation stage, death can occur. All right, and you have to keep your mind on that. Because so often when deaths occur, and you heard our tremendous keynote speaker say this, a lot of times families have no idea. It comes completely out of the blue. It absolutely cold cocks you, and you're thinking, how could that have happened? All right? So you don't wait, you don't take a chance. So, perhaps the greatest example of this in all of sports, anybody know who that guy is?
Len Bias. He got what?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got drafted by the Celtics and died a day or two later from cocaine.
Awesome. Did everybody hear that?
No.
All right, say it again louder, please.
Len Bias. He played for Maryland, got drafted by the Boston Celtics. He died 2 days later from a heart attack due to cocaine.
That's correct. Now, you know, my wife and I have this discussion all the time. She was fussing at me before when I was preparing to come here earlier today because she said, you used that Len Bias example, and that happened over 30 years ago, and nobody's going to remember him. Nobody knows about him. So for the record, sir, how old are you? You're 30 years old. This happened before you were born, didn't it?
3 years.
I want y'all to tell my wife this. The next time she couldn't make it here tonight, but I want y'all to tell her. All right. So he's absolutely right, folks. This is Len Bias. If you notice in the picture on the right, did anybody pick up on who happens to be trying to play defense against Len Bias? Who that guy is? Say, shout it out. Michael Jordan. Do you realize, folks, that at the time that that picture was taken and at the time that this happened, that Len Bias was considered to be a better player than Michael Jordan? He was considered to have more potential to be successful in the NBA than Michael Jordan, who many people consider to be the best ever. All right? That's how talented Len Bias was. That's how incredible a basketball player was. So as a basketball player he was. So as a result, in the 1986 draft, he was drafted #2 overall. And as our brilliant historian here, who's even studied stuff from before he was born, has shared with you, right? He died. But here's the thing, folks, the reason I use this example. He died from an overdose of cocaine, and he had tried it one time. It was the first time he had ever tried cocaine. He was in the experimental stage, experimentation stage in that example, that graphic that I showed you. And it killed him, totally ruined his life. And there's a 30 for 30 documentary, ESPN 30 for 30 documentary out entitled Without Bias, right? And it shows not only did it have ripple effects for his family and devastated all the people who loved him, but for so many people it had incredible ripple effects when Len Bias died, all right? Just experimentation. You know, all kids experiment. Don't think that. I'm sorry?
How old was he?
I'm not sure how old he was, actually. I think he was maybe 21 or 22.
Our expert says 21.
21, thank you. The expert says 21, so we're going to go with 21. All right. So this idea that they're just experimenting, I hope I've satisfied everybody's suspicion that they don't need to be worried about experimentation. All right. So here's another thing. This actually happened. A friend of mine invited me to speak on a panel quite some years ago. And we panelists together on a panel discussion. You don't need to worry about trying to read that, but I just wanted to show you that this was an actual note that I got from my friend. We did this panel discussion, and on that panel, I was emphatic in talking about how parents need to jump on it early. Be suspicious, be concerned, have a high index of suspicion if you see something going on with your youngster, and a low threshold for taking action on it. All right, and I really pushed that. And so this was probably a week or so after that panel discussion, and this is what he sent me. He said, the first part was talking about how, the great attendance that we had, but then in the second part, today I spoke to a mother who attended. About a year ago, they became aware of some alcohol and pot use by their teenage son. A year ago, just alcohol and pot, right? Since, she said, they've been concerned but had no evidence of ongoing problems. Again, how did this happen? How could that have happened? How can a family not know, right? As a result of attending the panel, she and her husband decided to search his backpack. Hooray, forget about that privacy nonsense, right? They found evidence of ongoing and more serious drug use. They spoke to him, he admitted to it, and he's going to get treatment. Jump on it early, be aggressive, never let your guard down. So, why would I bore you with a long definition of addiction, right? From the American Society of Addiction Medicine, of which I am a member, right? The American Society of Addiction Medicine defines addiction. This so-called short definition of addiction is anything but short, right? But it is an excellent definition of addiction. And I have a reason for going through this, folks, so please bear with me. Addiction is a primary chronic disease of brain reward. We could stop right there, and I could give you a whole discussion of that for an hour. What that means is we psychiatrists, you heard me tell I'm a psychiatrist, we psychiatrists have been among the worst, historically speaking, for telling people the misinformation that addiction is really just a symptom of an underlying mental health problem, an underlying issue like depression or anxiety or what have you. And that if you simply ignore the drug use for a while, but pay attention to the underlying problem and give treatment and hopefully cure that underlying problem, then the drug use will just sort of melt away, right? The idea being that the drug use was secondary to the underlying, the real problem. And folks, that has proved to be completely wrong. Totally wrong. And a lot of folks suffered for a long time because of us psychiatrists telling people the wrong thing. The fact of the matter is addiction is a primary disease. A person may also have, and usually does, also have depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, some other co-occurring mental health condition. But that means that they now have two primary conditions. They have an addiction disorder, and they have the other co-occurring mental health condition. And you cannot think about trying to hope that the addiction problem is going to go away just by treating the other problem and not paying very specific attention to the addiction disorder. Okay, so it's a primary condition. It is a chronic disease. A chronic disease. What does that mean? What it means is that Dr. Wally will treat well, she won't anymore because she's a professor. She's a big shot. But the interns and residents under her, right, will treat kids who have an ear infection and they may, or maybe pneumonia or something, and they'll give them antibiotics. And when they finish taking that course of antibiotics, the infection is cured. They are cured. The disease is over. We'll follow up with them, of course, to make sure that there's not a recurrence or something, or it wasn't a resistant bacterium that caused the problem, but basically it's cured. With addiction, when you send somebody to an addiction treatment program for their addiction problem, it is not cured. Addiction is a chronic, relapsing disease. It can be treated and it can be controlled, but it cannot usually be cured. And that's so important to understand, because when you have your loved one who's been in and out of rehab 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, the response isn't to think that addiction just can't be treated and can't be controlled. The response isn't to say that your loved one is just a schmuck because he doesn't really want to get well. The response is figure out what went wrong, figure out how we can perhaps do this better and more effectively this time, and go right back to getting them back into treatment. Okay? So those are the key things that I wanted to talk about. Lauren's already flashed the 5-minute sign, so I'm going to move on. The other point I have to make from this, though, is this. Notice this last word in this first paragraph, and the last 3 words, and other behaviors. In 2011, that was the first time when the American Society of Addiction Medicine recognized that addiction, it's not only is it not a drug-specific disease, that is to say, if you have an addiction to one drug, you can have an addiction to another drug, all right? But it also recognized that other behaviors can also fit under this disease of addiction. So it is possible for somebody to have a shopping addiction, or a sex addiction, or a gambling addiction, right? Or even a food addiction. And the same circuitry in the brain where they can show the problems that occur. And I have slides and I don't have time to show you about this. The same circuitry that's involved in the addiction to cocaine or crystal meth or opioids, it's the same exact circuitry that's involved in somebody who has a sex addiction or a shopping addiction or an internet pornography addiction. Okay? So it's not a drug-specific disease. It's not even a behavior-specific disease. These are some warning signs of teen drug use, and I believe that you're going to be covering that later, so I'm not going to waste time on that. What do you do to prevent your youngster from developing an addiction? And after this, I go through this stuff, I promise I'll shut up. All right? What do you do to prevent your youngster? Well, what does this show you? Family time, family rules, family standards, right? And family togetherness. All right? You need to communicate as a family with your youngster. Your youngster needs to understand what your family standards are. And you need to be willing to share that time with your youngster. Family meals taken together as much as possible. Now look, you know, my wife is a heck of a lot smarter and more educated than I am. She's an MD and a PhD, has her medical degree from actually UAB right here. So when my kids, like all of yours, were running a million different places, and I've always been a very busy professional. So I get that this is really difficult to do, like having your meals together every night at 6 o'clock. That just didn't happen in my household. All right, and so I understand that it's not realistic for every family, but spending a lot of time with your youngsters, making sure you communicate to them, that is very realistic for families, and it makes a very big difference. All right, so that's one rule. This is actually, and again, everything I'm saying here, by the way, has been borne out by the research into what helps prevent young people from developing substance use problems. So again, family time, family meals, family standards. Okay. Here's the other one. Don't be afraid to be that till of the hun parent who's more strict than the other parents. Okay? Don't be afraid to be that. In fact, that's actually a good thing. When you set your standards, you stick to them. You don't have to be your kid's friend. You can be that unpopular parent, that ridiculous, overprotective, extremist parent that doesn't let your kid do the stuff that all the other kids are allowed to do. It's okay to be that parent. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you this. This is where I went to undergrad. During freshman week, some of you, many of you went to college. You will remember during freshman week before classes start, you have the time to spend hanging out with all the other new freshmen coming in, and you sit around until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you just talk about all kinds of stuff, and you solve the world's problems together. Well, we did that during my freshman week as well. And in the course of talking, one of the things that one of us mentioned was the fact that, you know, I was that kid whose parents would always have an early curfew for me. All of my friends were able to go out and hang out and do all kinds of fun stuff when I had to be in the house, and it was just ridiculous. My parents were overprotective, they were extremists, they were ridiculous with their rules, and I was so mad at them. And lo and behold, like every other kid who was there with us, there were like 6 of us, were like, you too? I was that kid too. And then one of us actually said, well, maybe that has something to do with why we were here. I'm just saying, that doesn't guarantee that by being a good parent, your kid's necessarily going to end up at an elite Ivy League institution. But it does say that there's some commonality here about the young people whose parents are those extremist, till of the hun, independent thinking, overprotective parents who have rules that no other kid seems to have to follow. All right? Don't be afraid to be that parent. Third and final point I want to make on preventing your youngster from developing a substance use problem. Start with the man or woman in the mirror. The fact of the matter is I work with NBA athletes, right? So I've met every single guy in the NBA. You mentioned their name, I know them, I've met them. You know, if I run into them somewhere, I'll, you know, hug them, dap them up, whatever, I know these guys, right? But believe it or not, when your kids are making decisions about whether or not they're going to use substances and how they're going to use substances and what their relationship is going to be to substances, it's not going to be LeBron whose example they're going to follow. It's not going to be Steph Curry, despite the fact Steph Curry seems to be a tremendously good example, and I think he is a tremendously good example for people. They're not going to follow those guys. The people that your young people are going to follow are sitting in this room, all right? They're the ones that they're going to follow. But they're not necessarily going to just do what you say. They're going to pattern themselves after what you do. All right? So if you want to prevent your young person from developing a problem with substances, start with the man or woman in the mirror. This, by the way, is my favorite Michael Jackson song of all time. Start with the man or woman in the mirror. If you, for example, I was talking to somebody earlier today who was talking about how he's in recovery from addiction. If you happen to have a substance use issue and you know that you've had a substance use issue, understand that that means your youngster is at increased risk above the general population. And recognize that you need to share that with your youngster in a healthy way and try to help your youngster to understand the risk that they're under. If you are someone who comes home every day after a hard day of work and, has to fix yourself a drink in order to just make it through the rest of the evening, you need to check on that. You need to look at that because that's something that your youngster is going to observe. All right? So start with yourself and recognize if you have some patterns or some problematic relationship to substances, that's something that you're going to have to look at and you're going to have to deal with. If, on the other hand, you're somebody who's actually in recovery from addiction, hey, nothing wrong with taking your youngster to an open AA meeting, perhaps, so they can understand what recovery is and understand how devastating this disease of addiction can be. All right? So those are the things that I wanted to share with you. I'm already over my time. Lauren's been really nice. She didn't jump up and down and come up here and slug me. But thank you all very much. And I want to now introduce our next speaker, Dr. Rebecca Savage. Hello, Dr. Savage. She is a pediatrician and adolescent medicine specialist at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in the Division of Adolescent Medicine, my favorite age group of young people to work with, adolescents. During fellowship training in addiction medicine, she focused her research and clinical time on substance use prevention, screening and treatment for adolescents and young adults. She has a passion for educating pediatricians about how to identify and help adolescents with drug and alcohol concerns. After 2.5 years working at UAB College of Health, she recently returned to Children's of Alabama to see adolescents 11 to 21 years old for primary care, eating disorder care, substance use concerns, and also works as a physician at a local juvenile detention facility. She works part-time currently to spend more time with her sweet family, her husband Tom, and their 2 girls, Hannah Joy and Mary Hope. Dr. Rebecca Savage.
hear me?
Yeah.
Closer? I haven't really talked very much. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'll echo what Dr. Taylor said about being humbled about speaking behind the people ahead of me. So, my name is Rebecca Savage. I work at Children's of Alabama and UAB and with adolescent medicine. And I did my fellowship in adolescent medicine, and during that I spent a lot of time working with substance use, drug and alcohol use, and on prevention and treatment, and just I'm just honored to be here, and I'm glad to be able to talk with you guys a little bit more. A lot of things in my talk is similar to Dr. Taylor's, and I'll try not to repeat anything, but there's some additional things I think that would be important to hear. So I appreciate your time. I can figure this out. I don't have anywhere to put the mic, so I'm going to have to stay kind of close. Okay, so again, this is repeating what you've heard, and you all are here, and so you know this already, but parents are the #1 influence in their child's life. Children are less likely to use drugs if their parents talk to them about the dangers associated with drug use. That's exactly what we've been saying, and so I'll just reiterate that. That's my main point. So in my talk, and I'll keep it brief, I think, since we've already talked about some of the things I plan to say, is that we wanted to go over what medications are commonly misused or abused, and you'll see in addition to opioids, there's some others to know about and think about. We'll discuss why adolescents use these medications and where they obtain them, because that's important to know. And discuss what parents and practitioners can do to prevent misuse of medications. So at first I thought, well, I like to use the word misuse sometimes more than abuse, because sometimes again it's a spectrum of kind of where are we experimenting, are we really using them appropriately. So I would say that any time someone is taking a prescribed medication differently than it was originally intended, that would be an example of misuse, or taking someone else's prescription. So I know that I as a physician hear that a lot, it's no big deal. Just today actually, I heard an adolescent tell me sometimes my mom will give me half her Valium, that type of thing you guys have heard about a lot. And then taking an over-the-counter medication in the same way that you're not using as directed on the label. So any of that I would classify under misusing a medication. So what are some medications that are commonly misused or abused? And, these are the main categories, and I'm just kind of going to go through each of these and give some examples so you guys can hear names, and if you have any to add or questions, of course, say something. So, and each of these has its own separate slide. So we just heard a little bit about opioids, and again, commonly prescribed after procedures and trauma. I thought about the dentist as well, because I feel like my husband has had a series of root canals, and we ended up with probably 5 bottles of hydrocodone in our drawer, which that was my fault, because I'm like, I've got to get these back to to get rid of these medications, especially kids. I have little kids, but yeah, sometimes you will just end up with just inordinate amounts of extra medication, which we'll talk about again, and I reiterate the things that Dr. Taylor said to you earlier. So again, opioids should never be used for pain that's long-term. They're, in terms of, you hear about chronic pain, like chronic low back pain, or pain that's been occurring for months. And it's never recommended to use these type of pain medications. I've put some side effects there that all of you know about, and then examples. So I listed a few, just again, I wanted to put names so you guys would understand. They're different medications. You need to look at what's in each trade name for medication. Like if your bottle says Percocet, then know that that is an opioid. That has hydrocodone and Tylenol in it. So codeine cough syrup I brought up because of the age we're talking about here. I assume it's not common practice for a pediatrician to be prescribing codeine cough syrup a lot these days, and even when I was practicing at UAB College Health, seeing older individuals, I don't know of anybody who prescribed that, but you'll see that still being prescribed a good bit for adults, so cough medication that's actually an opioid. And I hear about it a lot, or I used to a few years ago with some populations, and like a drink that they call lean. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but where they mix codeine, young people mix codeine with like Sprite and Jolly Ranchers. And so if you hear about lean, or that's what they're talking about, it's usually codeine cough syrup. I just, again, wanted to mention a few examples. So what about stimulants? So these, I'm sure that you all have heard of these. These are medications for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and narcolepsy is another example. Like if you take a stimulant, it's not always necessarily because you have ADHD. You could have another medical condition that would benefit from a stimulant. But so these side effects include increase in alertness and energy. Your blood pressure can be higher. Your heart rate can be higher. Your appetite can decrease when you take these. I know if any of you have family members on these medications, you know what I'm talking about. But again, some adolescents can become addicted to these medications, or misuse them, use them in a way where they're experiencing euphoria or a high from taking these medications not as prescribed. And these are, I just mentioned they come in short and long-acting versions, so there's the spectrum of types here. But just a few examples, again, things that you guys have heard of, I'm sure, Adderall. And these are trade names just to help you identify the medication better. And I've given the generic name before the trade name. Okay, one thing, I'll go back to this for a second. One thing about stimulants, because I took this slide out, just to understand, there is some thought out there that perhaps stimulants could help as a study drug, I'll say. So again, I worked with college students for a few years, and this is one of the most common things that we would see in the clinic is students coming in asking about ADHD. Can I be tested for ADHD? I want to be on, I get a medication for it. So it's come up that a lot of students have the idea, young people have the idea that taking stimulant medication, even if they don't have ADHD, is actually going to bump up their performance. I'm going to stay awake all night because I'm going to be, and I can get this medication, and not always, as I'll bring up in a minute, not always from the physician, but from their friend or someone else. And there's actually been some studies that have shown that if stimulant medication are taken by children or adolescents who do not have ADHD, it actually worsens mental performance based on some different scans and blood flow changes to brain regions. When they gave it to people who did and did not have ADHD, there were just differences, and it actually impaired mental functioning more so in those who took it who did not already have ADHD. So I hope that came across to you guys correctly. But so I would, I guess, come back at your students or your children, whoever, who tell you, well, these are going to help me stay up and study so I can do better. Because I'm telling you, as one of the physicians at UAB College Health, that's so often that's the goal, is to work, go, I've got to do, achieve, perform. There's a lot of pressure, and they end up thinking things like a stimulant are going to help them get there. So just to bring that up as something that now you know, well, if you don't actually have ADHD, it's actually going to make things potentially worse for you. So just a little bit of information there. All right. I think I stopped it too long. It was telling me I needed to go faster. Okay. So this class of medications, I just grouped them together as sedatives, and they're typically prescribed for things like panic reaction. I feel like Dr. Taylor would give this talk a lot better than me because she did this all the time. For panic reaction, anxiety disorders, or sleep problems. So really the takeaway here is I wanted you guys to know about benzodiazepines. And those are things like I mentioned, Valium earlier is an example. But clonazepam, lorazepam, any of those ending in pam, usually, you can see that those are going to cause relaxation, sedation. People use them, again, sometimes for sleep problems. They work well for people who have panic disorders a lot of times. But one big takeaway about sedatives or benzodiazepines I wanted to say is that benzodiazepines are not first-line medication for anxiety disorders. And so that's just a piece of knowledge that they are addictive when taken, when misused or not taken correctly, when experimented with and along the spectrum. When they're used in combination with alcohol and things like that, they can be very, very dangerous and for overdose. And when you get, when you take benzodiazepines regularly, if you stop, the withdrawal from benzodiazepines is life-threatening and deadly. So again, benzodiazepines are a dangerous class of medications, and I would ask a lot of questions as a parent, going back to our opioid discussion, with advocating for your child while you're at the physician's office about what the medication is. Is this the best medication or the only option for my child for this problem? So again, I just wanted to bring out that for generalized anxiety disorder, it's not recommended as the first medication. And again, I'm not the expert on that as much as Dr. Stephen Taylor is, so you can ask him the questions. Okay, so other medications I wanted to bring up were just mostly over-the-counter medications. Some of these aren't. Sleep medications aren't over-the-counter, but the big one I wanted to pull out, and I go like, what is this robot with the bottle? This is, I looked up, I was just Googling robo-tripping, which is what it means to overdose or to misuse dextromethorphan, and sort of, I guess that's just a term that a lot of kids use for, it's robo-tripping again. But dextromethorphan is in a lot of over-the-counter cough and cold medications. Again, I'll list it out a few names, nothing against Robitussin, but just wanted to bring out, again, how even over-the-counter medications can sometimes, and we have seen them misused by young people if they're trying to achieve a high or euphoria, if they drink enough of it or take enough of it. And even, Imodium or loperamide can do the same, cause euphoria and higher than recommended doses. Diet pills and laxatives, I won't go into, but just another example of something over the counter. Again, I work with eating disorder patients as well, and we ask about this a lot in that setting, but just thinking about those things as you see what's in your home and as you see what might be with your child or that they may have with them or what they have access to. Just, again, always being on high alert and knowing, staying one step ahead. I'm going to skip this. It's like a minute or minute and a half long YouTube video, just reiterating. It's a story about a young man who did pass away of opioid overdose. But this comes from the Medicine Abuse Project. And the Medicine Abuse Project, I would recommend you guys go to that website. It's under the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. That's a really great website. It has a lot of videos that I would recommend looking through. I really, enjoyed it myself. I think I hit it all. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so just a couple slides on statistics going into what children or adolescents use and sort of some numbers, and the most recent numbers I could find on who reported misusing prescription drugs in the past year. And in 2016, when you just looked at 12 to 17-year-olds, and this was a national survey done across different parts of the U.S., it was only about, I said only, but that's still more than we like, right? About 6% of 12 to 17-year-olds reported that they misused a prescription medicine in the last year. And again, of course, most parents believe their child has never taken a prescription drug for a reason other than its intended use. And another statistic, of course, of those who start using heroin, 80% started by misusing prescription drugs. So just to time what we've already said here, a note on brain development. I know Dr. Wall, you mentioned this a little bit as well. And this is just an image that shows you the differences in color or how the different areas of the brain mature over time. And just bring it home. This says age 20 at the bottom here that I would just take home that at age 20 the brain is still developing and the adolescent brain doesn't fully mature until 24, 25 years old. And the reason why we're talking about this and why I talk to a lot of people about this and how important it is to prevent drug and alcohol problems in youth is because their brains are developing. and they are at higher risk of becoming addicted to these medications and to drugs and alcohol because of that. And there's different pathways that are forming and things that are maturing. They're changed, they're halted, and they're at high risk of addiction in this stage. And that's why I think as pediatricians, we should be thinking of this more and talking about it more. And so I appreciate you guys all being here and being so interested in it. And then again, this is from the same survey where students said that they, that the source where they found the medication that they misused. And there's a lot of numbers there, but I tried to just point out, again, in the red are the younger populations. They split out 12 to 17-year-olds in this survey from the young adults. And I like to see young adult data too, because that, for me, that counts as my patients. Those are still, you know, our kids, 18 to 25-year-olds. And across the board in both age groups, for stimulants, opioids, and sedatives, they're getting these medications that they are not using correctly. They're getting them from their friends or from a relative. So they're finding them from their grandparents, their parents, or again, especially for stimulants, from probably a friend, just from my anecdotal experience. So that's the takeaway there. They're getting them from your home or from their grandparents' homes or from their friends' home. So they're usually not buying them off the street from a dealer, and they're usually, again, they are getting them from doctors, but the majority is things that we can prevent. That's what we're here to talk about. So now this is some of the things that Dr. Taylor's already talked about that you guys, now we know, that we can prevent as parents. We can prevent this from happening by educating ourselves, which is why we're here, by monitoring use of all medications. And I asked a local adolescent psychologist, Heather Austin, about what one takeaway would you tell this group that I'm going to go speak to about preventing medication misuse. And she said that. She said there's so many patients that she's seen and that we've even shared ourselves that their parents allowed them to manage their own medications. And that's a big no-no. A big no-no. That would be the one thing she would share with you. So I'll just say it again because I think it's worth saying. And then tell your friends that, to, you know, spread the word. That's when you hear, yeah, so, you know, so-and-so's daughter took, you know, is in charge of her own medications. Just be the advocate for your friend group and your community. Secure the meds safely in your home, as we talked about, and then dispose of the medication properly. So go to Walgreens and dump all of that extra hydrocodone out. I'll give you a link at the end of the talk, and really it's through found it through the Healthy Home and Coalition website that has a link there on the website of local dispensaries where you can take, or local dispensaries, local area places where you can take disclosure your prescription meds as well. And then what are the bags called again? I haven't heard of them. The Terra bags that everyone got when they come in. I think that's great. I've never actually seen one, but that just shows you I needed to know myself. Okay. Yeah, I know. I got rid of all those hydrocodone bottles. Okay, and then what can practitioners do, or physicians, or providers? Again, education I think is so important, and that goes along with advocating for your community, for your family. But track and monitor prescriptions written to your patients. So I felt like I would be wrong if I didn't mention that as we prescribe these controlled medications like pain, like opioid, all the things I've mentioned really, opioids, stimulants, benzodiazepines, that we should be looking up on the prescription drug monitoring program. We should be looking up and ensuring that our patients aren't getting stimulants from another provider in another county somewhere that I don't know they're seeing. So that's something all physicians should have access to and be able to do in this state. And I just say that I would just wanted to bring that up. I felt I'd be remiss if I didn't. Partner with you all, our community for prevention, and assess our patients for problems when they come in, like screen the patients we see for substance use issues and talk to them about it. And I put a note about naloxone here, because naloxone is a medication that is a reversal agent if you do have an opioid overdose, and it's saved many, many lives. many more can talk more about it than I can, but I just wanted to bring that up because a lot of times we should be thinking as physicians when we prescribe pain medications like opioids, we should also be prescribing naloxone, telling them about pharmacies that have naloxone, and I'll just leave it there. And then, again, this goes back to Dr. Taylor. I just said, again, how do we advocate as a partnership? So the parents and the providers are partners. How do we advocate? And this is exactly what Dr. Taylor said. I won't go into it again, but it's all about how long do I need to, when you're prescribed a medication for pain or for whatever, asking if there are other options. How long do I need to take this medicine? Can you only give me a small amount so I won't have a lot left over? How much will I need? What happens? What are the risks of misusing this medication? And again, knowing the risk in your family of substance use problems. Do you have a family history of substance use problems? And then just being aware and talking about that. Know about appropriate anxiety treatment. Again, that was just a little plug because I wanted to bring that out just so you guys can advocate for your child in terms of medications they're prescribed. And again, the provider should be telling the family if there's a potential for misuse with a certain medicine they prescribe to you. Okay? And these are some resources. I don't know if you guys get a copy of this, but again, medication disposal, if you'll just look up Healthy Home Coalition, I'm sure there are other places locally, but I just felt it was easy to find there. And I would highly recommend looking at the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids just for a lot of information. And then there's some other good resources. I'll leave it up for a second. I think that's all I had. Again, that was my takeaway. Thank you guys so much for letting me. Do you want me to do the next one?
I think Lauren, you want to introduce the last one? All right.
All right, guys, so as we wrap this thing up, our final speaker tonight is Kevin Bridgman, works at Emerging Adult Counselor with Bradford Health Services in the Birmingham Regional Office. Kevin has over 7 years of experience working with adolescents and young adults struggling with a variety of health issues, mental health, substance abuse, and life adjustment issues in a multitude of settings, including community agencies and in the school system. So please welcome Kevin Bridgman.
Everybody hear me? My voice is pretty booming in general. So again, my name is Kevin. I am the Emerging Adult Counselor with Bradford Health here in Birmingham. The title suggests it's exactly what it sounds like. I work with young adult males who are still emerging. If anybody's seen that old Matthew McConaughey movie, Failure to Launch, that's exactly what you were envisioning. These young men are typically anywhere from 19 upwards of 30, a little bit over that, maybe younger at 18 if they've already graduated high school, but they are exactly what comes to mind when you think of emerging adults. If they have been to college, they have dropped out or been on academic probation due to substance abuse or an active addiction at that age. Typically, they live with mom or dad or extended relatives, or they're couch surfing because they can't hold steady employment due to their substance use or addiction. Luckily, they're still young enough, most of them, to be on mom and dad's insurance, so they're able to get proper treatment for their addiction. I feel very humbled to be able to follow these wonderful doctors and scientists who have provided you with a great amount of research and statistics. My goal here is not to provide statistics and all of that because I'm not a researcher, I'm not a doctor. I'm going to tell you about a personal narrative and what I'm seeing, with my young adults and also the adolescents that I've treated. First off, what are some signs and symptoms? These are pretty straightforward. All of our doctors have kind of talked about this. Unusual sleeping patterns, sneaking around, denial, changes in peer group, changes in their manner of speech, changing in their wardrobe. So any change that you see that you know your kids better than anybody, if you see a change that's raising a red flag or that's alarming you, track that down. Okay, I hear all the time my parents or parents say, well, my parents said it too. That's not my child. My child would never do that. Well, okay, then we're in a great amount of denial if we're still saying that. Again, our doctors have talked about the development of adolescent brains, so I'm not going to bore you with all that. What I will tell you is part of my story, part of the reason why I do what I do. How many of us are familiar with the DARE program or went through it? All right? What a waste of time for most of us, okay? Because for me, I remember as an elementary school child sitting there thinking, I can't wait to go through the DARE program. There's a talking car, and there's cops, and this is so cool. And, you know, I signed my little pledge sheet, and I get my t-shirt, and I say, I'm never going to do drugs. That's not going to be me. Well, at age 13, me and my buddy Chase is rolling up our first joint, okay? That's just reality. I tell you that because at age 15, I was arrested in my school cafeteria, and I was charged with possession and intent. I was 15 years old. My parents had no clue, okay? The only reason they knew is because a teacher at my school took charge and overheard a conversation I had in the hallway with another colleague of mine, or peer rather, that here's what I had, right? My adolescent brain, I'm not too smart. So I'm just blasting it to the entire world. Here's what I have, X, Y, Z, and here's where it is. Well, luckily that teacher called my parents and they took action and said, okay, what are we going to do about this, right? No longer were they saying, that's not my kid, that's not Kevin. Oh, that was Kevin, okay? So I tell you all that to, again, just see what's normal versus concerning, right? For those of you that have teenagers, you know they're moody, right? God bless you, they're moody. You know, they get frustrated at the drop of a hat, they have mood swings, you know, if they go through a breakup, it's the end of the world. I'm never going to find love again, holy crap. You know, I got this test coming up, I'm never going to survive, I'm not going to get into Harvard, who am I thinking? Right? That's normal. We want to normalize that and let them know, hey, look, whatever you're going through, that's okay. Because I can tell you, as a 15-year-old adolescent, right, going back in my little time machine, I was crying out for help. Because all I wanted was to be heard. Because at that time, every adult in my life, including teachers, were saying, oh, don't worry about it, that doesn't matter. You're just a kid, what do you know? Our kids do know. And they want to be heard, and they want to feel like they matter. That's what Kevin wanted at 15 years old. That's why I turned to drugs and alcohol, because I wanted to feel something, okay? What's concerning is that they're constantly anxious, right? Dr. Savage talked about the first line of treatment is not to throw a pill in their way. Talk therapy. Sit them down and explore what's going on. What are they anxious about, right? Depression. Depression is very real. If your child is suffering from clinical depression, then by all means, get them help, okay? But sometimes they may be depressed because of the drugs they're using, all right? Rapid changes of personality, right? Not just coming home and you ask them how your day is, and they say, oh, you know, it's fine, whatever, and closing the door to their room, normal. I'm talking about if they're, you know, if they're becoming manipulative, if you suspect they're lying, if they're showing you these signs and symptoms, like Dr. Taylor said, like Dr. Savage said, Dr. Wally before me, do not ignore them. Don't think I'm being a helicopter parent and I'm being too strict on my kid, I gotta be their friend. I've got a lot of peers that because of that parenting, wound up in addiction treatment. Or better yet, they're 6 feet under. Because their parents wanted to be the cool kid. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that because that's very real. My first experiences with this, and with Bradford in general, is when my best friend Scott was put in adolescent treatment up at our Madison facility at age 17 for a severe cocaine addiction. Okay? My second one was when another good friend of mine, Jonathan, at age 18, with the whole world in front of him, overdosed at the University of Alabama from a deadly overdose of Oxycontin and Xanax. I said, that's not Jonathan. Who knew? Yeah, that's what's going on. Normal appearance for teenagers, experimenting with fashion trends, right? I want to be on the cutting edge of fashion. I want to have all the new brands. And typically this happens around middle school, because in elementary school, these kids don't care what they're wearing. Then they get to middle school and it's all, oh, you got to wear Gucci and Abercrombie or whatever's the new thing today. I don't know. I know that was me. I was like, I got to wear polo. I got to have this. You know? Now I was reminded, but I came from a poor background. I get to middle school and I'm like, things are very different. Very different. All right, my adolescents experiments, young adults experiments. That's what they're supposed to do. They're trying to figure out their footing in the world and what their role is. Don't stifle that, right? Really encourage that. But when it becomes concerning is when they just go completely 180 on you, and they start, wearing completely different looks or stop caring what they look like. If you have a young woman, a young lady who cares about her appearance, and then all of a sudden just goes, wearing sweatpants and PJs all the time, that could be a concern. It really could. If they're starting to get tattoos, hopefully at this age you're not consenting for them to get tattoos, but if you find that they got a tattoo, another concern, because they got it off the street. And that's not very safe, not very hygienic. Any piercings that you don't know about, again, neglected hygiene, any burns on hands or clothes, could be a sign or symptom that they are smoking nicotine or worse, marijuana, and they are burning their clothes, especially look in their car, because you're the one paying for it. Right? If you look in their car and they got burn stains on the ceiling or the seats or wherever, that's alarming. Because not only are they allowing other peers to smoke or use in their car, they may be doing the same thing, or better, worse yet, they may be driving while doing this. Any weight loss, weight gain, typically you're going to see weight loss with the use of stimulants because it suppresses the appetite. Weight gain if they are using alcohol or certain opioids, which cause constipation, that could cause weight gain as well. So we want to be mindful of that. Also, Dr. Savage talked about eating disorders. We want to be mindful of that. Are they eating a lot, and then are they purging? If your child's intake of food is a lot, and you don't see any fluctuation in weight gain, be mindful. That could be concerning. These connections, these social connections, they're gonna have a decreased communication with you all. That's what they're going to do. So for those of you with small kids, they're going to ignore you. They're not going to want to have anything to do with you. And that's normal. All right? They're going to be more focused on friends, after school activities. Promote that, okay? You want them to try different activities and get and be involved with different peer groups. More time on their phone, social media, playing games, spending a lot of time with their friends. Another big alarm right here is making some new friends. If they're making friends that are much older than them, that's a warning sign, all right? Because at 15 years old, all of my friends were seniors. I thought I was a cool kid. No, they were just using me because of drug use. Here's the thing. Drug users are one of the most accepting communities on the face of this planet. The only requirement you have to use or be involved in this community is desire to get high. That's it. They'll say, come on in. Glad to have you, especially if you got money. What's concerning is no family involvement at all. Right? They're not coming to the dinner table. They're not sitting down if you have a family game night or a family reunions or family vacations. I don't want to go on that. I don't want to be involved on that. No interest in any other friendships. If they're getting rid of their old friends, also an alarm. Right? Part of growing up, part of our evolution as humans is kind of taking inventory of things we need and don't need. And part of growing up and maturing is identifying those friends that we no longer want to be with. Again, normal. But if I start dumping or going away from every other friend that I have and spending time with all these older ones, that's an alarm. Not giving any information on their families, their backgrounds. Oh, that's just John. He lives so-and-so. Okay, well, who's John's parents? What do they do? How old is John? Does he even go to your school? What's his deal? All right, and giving up interest in like sports and things like that. Because I can tell you, I was interested in a lot of stuff, but when drugs and alcohol entered my life, no. The drugs and alcohol were what I was interested in. And let me preface that by saying I myself am not in recovery of addiction. I don't want to put that out there, but I do have experience with what we've, Dr. Taylor used the spectrum and Dr. Savage used misuse. I was one of those that was abusing or misusing, right? Because that's what I thought was cool. Thankfully, I never crossed over into that threshold of addiction. I don't know what that feels like. All right, but I do come from a long line of family members who have dealt with it, alcohol, opiates, things like that. So I know the risks involved, and luckily for me, I was able to say, you know what, I don't want to go down that route. Rebellious behavior, that's what teenagers do. They get rebellious. They buck the system, right? Again, normal. They want independence. They want out from under mom and dad, okay? We want to promote that within reason, within healthy boundaries. Explore. hang out with different people, right, that are different from you, because that promotes growth and wellness and acceptance, right? But what's concerning if they're constantly fighting and dropping grades, right? If I'm used to making A's and B's and I'm making C's and D's, that might not say I'm using drugs. That might mean I'm dealing with something emotionally that I don't know how to handle. I'm not equipped to handle with because my adolescent brain won't allow me. If I'm having legal issues, right? At 15 years old, I never imagined I'd be charged with possession and intent. I'm just a child. Right? Luckily, I did what I had to do and those charges got dropped. But I have worked with individuals that weren't so lucky, that have driven under the influence once they get their car, and heaven forbid, they have killed other people or themselves, or moms and dads or things like that. A compulsive need to argue, they're always arguing, yelling, being overly dramatic, again, a warning sign. And especially, you know, God bless these kids these days. You know, most of us in this room didn't have to deal with cyberbullying. You know, we went home, if we didn't want to be communicated with, if you didn't catch us on the landline on the old rotary phone, then well, you're out of luck. Nowadays, it's everywhere. These kids cannot get away from being bullied. They go to school, they're bullied. They come home, they're bullied. They're bullied throughout the whole night. They wake up, same cycle. We want to be mindful of that. All right. So, we all know that drug use changes the brain. Here's the thing that, if you take home anything tonight for me, here's what I want you to understand, is if we're going to have, you know, the old birds and bees conversation with our children, or with the children we teach or we treat, then right after that, we need to have the Xanax and heroin talk. That's just plain and simple. Parents ask me all the time, what do I need to be doing? You need to sit your child down, and you need to have a very honest and genuine discussion. And say, look, there are some substances out there that I need you to be familiar with. And when you are presented with them, when you are presented with these substances, here's what you need to know in order to make an informed decision. As Dr. Taylor said, experimentation, normal. Right? Your kids are going to experiment, okay? It's like the old Hansel and Gretel. This bar is too hot, this bar is too cold, this was just right. Right? They're going to experiment. But when they're introduced to drugs and alcohol, here's the information I want you to have so you can make an informed, educated decision for you and for the rest of your life and family. Because here's what you need to know. There's the main chemical component that's being elicited when we use drugs and alcohol. What is it? Anybody know what it is? What's the main neurotransmitter being elicited? Dopamine. Right? It's the feel-good drug. Anything in life that makes us happy is due to dopamine production. Without it, we wouldn't know what happiness is, and we wouldn't be able to deal with this thing called life. It's very, very important. And when we ingest drugs and alcohol, that's what's getting produced in the brain's reward system. And Dr. Taylor can tell you more about that. He's the expert. But here's what I want you to know in terms of your children. What you need to tell them is when you ingest these drugs and alcohol, they're going to make you feel good. Right? See, I grew up, my parents said, you drink or you use drugs, you're going to die. They're going to kill you, they're bad for you, and it's game over. And guess what? Man, when I was 13 years old and Chase and I smoked that first joint, I didn't die. I didn't feel bad. In fact, I felt pretty good and a little hungry. But at that point, my adolescent brain at 15 said, ooh, my parents lied to me. Now, what else are they lying about? So I want to try everything and anything. And I did. But it did me no good because I was just trying to mask something that I was going through emotionally, that I was confused, that I was, you know, looking for acceptance anywhere I could. And like I said earlier, drug users, drug community, very accepting. All right? So again, as they talked about, the doctors have the most commonly used gateway, marijuana, alcohol, right? Those are the gold standards. That's what you see all the time. But again, the biggest increase in use right now is prescription drugs, whether it's opiates, Xanax, Adderall, right? All of these things we're seeing an alarming rate among young people, okay? And like the doctors have already alluded to, they're not getting it off the street from Jay-Z to drug dealer. They're getting it from TJ to classmate or mom and dad, right? right? That's where I was getting most of my alcohol, was Dad's liquor cabinet and Mom's medicine cabinet. There was a wide array of substances that were free for the taking. So I'll just reiterate, if you do have drugs, or if they're not drugs, but prescription medications in your home or any sort of alcohol, please lock it up. It's not that difficult. Put it behind lock and key. And again, continue educating your child about the dangers. IV drug use and heroin, that's the majority of the people I treat. My guys right now, most of them deal with IV drug use, whether it's methamphetamine or heroin or any other prescription opiate. And as someone alluded to earlier, they didn't start that way. Right? Nobody woke up one morning and said, ooh, today's the day I shoot heroin. That's not how it happens. It's a progression. Because they start with Mom and Dad's medicine cabinet, or Grandma's OxyContin prescription, or, you know, Joe and Susie at school said, here, take this, it's going to make you feel better. Try it. And so they do, and then it works, right? Until eventually it doesn't, because that solution you're looking for, or they're looking for, or I was looking for, or everybody in recovery is looking for, that solution is only temporary. Because eventually it's going to wear off, and they're going to look for this, that, or whatever else. And when that wears off, the end of the road is IV. All right, that's the end game right there. That's the most lethal route of administration we know of. Okay. We've already alluded to a lot of these drugs of abuse. You already know them. What I want to kind of go over is the rise in these gas station drugs, or these vape shop drugs that you may not even are aware exist. All right. You go to any gas station, or almost any gas station, I don't want to generalize, but you go to the majority of gas stations here in Birmingham, and you go up and you have, at the cashier, you got all the candy and all the other knickknacks, the keychains and whatnot, and you've got the you know, rolled cigars behind you and the cigarettes, they're all up there. Well, look to your right or to your left, and those little kiosks, right there with the 5-hour energies, there exists a dangerous class of synthetic drugs that are perfectly legal. And guess what? They're packaged in multicolored designs and multi-flavors, and they're targeted at the kids and young people. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Tiana, which is just like 5-hour energy. Tiana, the active ingredient is tianeptine. The scary thing is that gas station high that these kids are getting for $30+ a bottle are attaching to the same opiate receptors that heroin is. And these kids don't know it. I had the unfortunate experience the other day of being at a local convenience store, and in front of me was a doctor, full scrubs, had his little beeper on, talking about he's starting his shift at UAB, and he bought a bottle of Tiana, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's very different. This guy's about to start his shift, and he's consuming legal heroin. Right? We talked about lean. There's also legal lean. I don't know if you've ever seen that. First time I got introduced to that was at a gas station in Coleman. I'm up there and advertising, bright, bold, colorful, you know, advertisement. Legal lean. Just like a slushy machine. And just pull it and have all I want. I don't know what's in it, but legal lean. Come on. Another one is sleepwalkers. You ever seen those in a bright blue and white bottle, sometimes purple. Looks like kind of smoke a little bit. Again, looks like a 5-hour energy. But my guys that have taken it tell me it's more akin to like synthetic MDMA. It's more of a stimulant, but it's also a relaxant, much like Xanax. So very, very deadly when used or misused. All right, it can cause a multitude of health problems. Again, some of the things we hear is that's not my child. My child's too good. He or she's involved in all this. They're doing that. They're too involved. That's just a common myth. If you see warning signs, again, you as the parents are the expert in your child. If you see any change, or their pediatrician or their teacher start to see changes and they come to you, don't dismiss it. Don't say that's not my kid. Let's be proactive. Or I would know my kids attend church, or I was attending church too. Right? I was doing all those things. Didn't matter. Again, what I want you to take home from this is that these drugs and alcohol that these young teenagers and these young adults are taking are making them feel good, and that's what we need to sit them down and talk to them. Have the sex talk, have the drug talk. Here's what's out there. Let's not shy away from it. Shying away from it's got us to this point. We can't continue to ignore it or sweep it under the rug. We've got to get ahead of this thing and be proactive and say, this is what's out there. Here's what you need to be informed about. Okay? And so I want to leave you, I know I'm probably out of time. Again, lock up anything. Again, depression and suicide, it's alarming among young adults and teenagers. Again, don't just, there's a meme going around that my friends are sharing and my guys are showing me. It says, check on the happiness. Check on the happiness. Meaning the ones that are smiling all the time and they seem like they get it all together, check in on them. Because you never know what they're going through. I always say it's the sad clown effect. On the outside, the clown's smiling, right? On the inside, that clown, he or she may be breaking, bloody, and suicidal. It doesn't take much to check out and say, hey, how you doing, man? You all right today? Hey, I see you. You know, you never know how long that will go in somebody's life. Again, what can you do? Trust your gut. If you see something, say something, whether it's your child or another child. Blow the whistle, right? In this case, snitches don't get stitches, right? It may save a life. Have open and non-judgmental communication. Again, be very open, be very transparent, be very genuine. Maybe even discuss your experience with the use of drugs and alcohol, or better yet, the family. Because as every doctor here has alluded to, about 50% or higher of addiction is genetic. And when we talk about genetics, we're not talking about just mom and dad. We're talking about your mom and dad, and their mom and dad, and so on and so forth. And it's being funneled into this thing called me. All right? Don't be afraid to ask your children questions. Ask every single day. And get help as soon as possible. So where can you seek help? So here in Birmingham, as part of Bradford, we have a regional office right over here in Vestavia, on the Hoover-Vestavia line, where 65 meets 31. We have free and completely confidential consults, right? It costs nothing to bring your child or loved one in for a consultation. Doesn't mean they're locked in, that they got to pay it out of pocket on anything. It's just a consultation, completely confidential. In our Birmingham office, we have adolescent programs. We have our young adult program, right? Adolescent programs from age 13 up to 18, right? And 13, yes, we have seen 13-year-olds, okay? They're getting younger. That's what we have to know. Our adolescent program is located up in Madison near Huntsville. We offer residential treatment there, which is long-term. They then can transition to IOP, or if they're experiencing legal issues, behavioral issues, by all means, bring them in. They may benefit from IOP, which is intensive outpatient. It's a group that meets 4 days a week, 3 hours a day. They may benefit from that. We do offer drug education one Saturday a month for teenagers and parents. We do offer a family support group, which is completely free of charge. You don't even know how to, you don't even have to know how to spell Bradford to be able to come to this family support group. All right? It is on Thursday evenings at our Vestavia office, right down the road. It is from 5:30 to 6:30, completely confidential with a licensed clinician, and it's free. I can't stress that enough. It's a resource for you to have. And we're not the only game in town. I want you to be familiar with some other people that do a lot of great work and a lot of great things. Beacon Recovery, which is an offset of UAB, they do a lot of great work with adolescents in this area. Children's Psychiatric Intake, that center, that you can call that, again, confidential, to see what resources they have, whether they can get involved on an emotional level, mental health. U-Talk, which was formerly Teen Link for teens. Your teens can call this number if they're feeling, symptoms of depression or anxiety, or they don't know how to deal with something at school, or they don't know where to turn. And I don't want to talk to mom and dad, and I can't talk to everybody else. Provide them with this number. Let them know there is somebody to talk to. Impact Family Counseling has an office right here in Vestavia. They also have one in south side of Birmingham. They have a lot of great support groups, a lot of educational groups offered to families and adolescents to get the help they need, the resources they need. And Alsana as well. Again, just another resource for children to have. And again, another resource, we didn't put it on here, but it's a newer resource. It's Magic City Acceptance Center. It's aimed at the LGBTQ community. Again, that community is more at risk for substance abuse and addiction because of what they're going through. because of they're being judged, or they don't know where to turn, and they don't feel accepted. And again, it's the Magic City Acceptance Center. So if your child or a loved one or someone you know in your family is struggling with acceptance of their sexuality or anything like that, please give them that resource and let them know there is a place to go to be safe. Again, for any questions you may have, our number's right here, our table's over there. Give us a call for a free consultation, just any resources you may want or need. Again, free, confidential. And again, it's an honor to be here with you all, and thank you for putting up with my rant for however long that was.
Thank you to all our presenters. Thank you to our audience. I think our presenters will hang around for a little bit, so if you want to come ask a question or anything, please feel free to do that. Everybody drive safe home.